The First Day of School, Part 2, paragraphs 24 through 44. Something had gone wrong, bad enough wrong, so the National Guard had to be called out. It's 8:25, his mother said. Did you get that snap sewed on right, Audrey? As her experienced fingers examined the shoulder of Audrey's dress, they lingered a moment in an involuntary sheltering caress. It's all arranged, she told her children. How you'll walk down to the Baptist church and meet the others there. You know, there'll be Reverend Chander, Reverend Smith, and Mr. Hall to go with you. It may be that the white ministers will go with you, or they may be waiting at school. We don't know. But now you be sure. Don't go farther than the Baptist church alone. Carefully, she lifted her hand, cleared of Audrey's shoulder. John thought, why doesn't she hug her if that's what she wants to do? He pushed away from the table and went out the front porch. The dazzling sunlight lay shadowless on the street that swept down towards the Baptist church at the end of the colored section. The street seemed awfully long this morning, the way it had looked when he was little. A chicken was clucking contentedly behind the neighbor's house, feeling the warmth settling itself into the sun-warm dust. Lucky chicken. He blinked at the sun's glare on the concrete steps leading down from the porch. He remembered something else from the time he was little. Once he had kicked Audrey's doll buggy down these same steps. He had done it out of meanness for some silly reason. He had been mad at her. But as soon as the buggy had started to bump down, he had understood how terrible it was not to be able to run after it and stop it. It had gathered speed at each step, and when it hit the sidewalk, it had spilled over. Audrey's doll had smashed into sharp little pieces on the sidewalk below. His mother had come out of the house to find him crying harder than Audrey. Now you know that when something gets out of your hands, it's in the devil's hands, his mother had explained to him. Did she expect him to forget now that that was always the way things went to smash when they got out of hand? Again, he heard the sirens and the hooting, mocking horns from the center of town. Didn't his mother think they could get out of hand? He closed his eyes and seemed to see something like a doll buggy bump down long steps like those at Joseph P. Gilmore High. And it seemed to him that it was not a doll that was riding down to be smashed. He made up his mind then he would go today because he had said he would. Therefore, he had to. But he wouldn't go unless Audrey stayed home. That was going to be his condition. His bargaining looked perfect. He would trade them one for one. His mother and Audrey came together onto the porch. His mother said, my stars, I forgot to give you the money for the groceries. She let the screen door bang as she went swiftly back into the house. As soon as they were alone, he looked at Audrey's bare arms in his hand and picked hard. You got to stay home, he whispered. Don't you know there's thousands of people down there? Didn't you hear them coming in all night long? You slept, didn't you? All right. You can hear them now. Tell her you're sick. She won't expect you to go if you're sick. I'll knock you down. I'll smash you if you don't tell her. He bared his teeth and twisted his nails into his skin of her arm. Hear them. Horns, he hissed. He forced her halfway to her knees with the strength of his fear and rage. They swayed there, locked for a minute. Her knees dropped to the porch floor. She lowered her eyes. He thought he had won, but she was saying something, and in spite of himself, he listened to her almost whisper Ruth's refusal. Don't you know anything? Don't you know it's harder for them than us? Don't you know Daddy didn't go to the mine this morning? They laid him off on account of us. They told him not to come if we went to school. Uncertainly, he relaxed his grips. How do you know all that? I listened, he said. Her eyes lit with a sudden spark that seemed to come from their absolute brown depth. But I don't let on all I know the way you do. I'm not a, her last words sunk so low that he could not exactly hear it. But if his ears missed it, he understanding caught him. He knew she had said him, coward. He let her get up then. She was standing beside him, sirens and prim, serene and prim, when their mother came out on the porch again. Here, child, their mother said to Audrey, counting the dollar bills in her hand. There's 6, and I guess it will be all right if you have some left, if you and brother get yourself a cone to lick on the way home. John was not looking at his sister then. He was already turning to face the shadowless street, but he heard the unmistakable pause, amusement of her voice when she said, Ma, don't you know we're a little too old for that? Yes, you are, said her mother. Seems I had forgotten that. They were too old to take each other's hands either, as they went down the steps of their home and into the street. As they turned to the right, facing the sun, they heard the chattering of tanks' treads on the pavement by the school. A voice too distant to be understood bawled a military command. There were horns again and a scenario of boos. Behind them, they heard their mother calling something. It was lost in the general racket. What? John called back to her. What? She had followed them out as far as the sidewalk, but not past the gate. As they hesitated to listen, she put her hands to either side of her mouth and called to them the words she had so often used when she let them go away from home. Behave yourself, she said.